What's up, gangsters? Time for episode 6 of this little Tamiya 1/48 scale Spitfire build. I don't feel like I accomplished a whole lot with this one. It's really just mostly going to be some painting, but I think there's some useful commentary in here. But first, I think what I might try to do is keep up with the questions that I'm getting as we go. And somebody asked a really good one after the fourth segment, which was, how do you decide how much detail to include? And that's a really good question because we are about to get into the cockpit. And at least for aircraft with me, that's the first place that I start thinking about adding additional detail because it's usually the first part that you do. Now, I am not with this particular one. But that doesn't mean that anybody else building it shouldn't consider it. And here's how I make those decisions. It really is a cost-benefit ratio kind of calculation, risk versus reward, that type of thing. What is the value of the detail work going to be, both visually and in terms of how much fun it's going to be? I mean, you have to account for that. And when I think about detail, I think about just everyday stuff, and then I think about really high value detail. So for example, seat belts, that's high value detail because it's very visible, right? You can pretty much see the seat belts looking in the cockpit of any aircraft model, at least a fighter plane type thing. On the other hand, adding hoses and wires and electrical stuff inside the cockpit, that is cool, but it's not super high value, and part of the reason being because it's just typically so hard to see, especially at 1/48 scale, and especially again with a Spitfire, because Spitfire cockpits are just not easy to see into. It's a little bit better at 1/32nd, and if you've got the cockpit open and the side door open and all that, but even then, it becomes a calculation of, okay, how much of this do I really want to try to do? Because when you start looking at reference photos, you can get sucked down the rabbit hole in a hurry. Because there is more wiring and cabling and hosing and tubing than you can ever hope to accomplish at scale. At least, unless you're David Glenn and you're building a 1/5 scale Spitfire. So again, you just have to decide how hard is it going to be and what's the visual impact going to be. And then you have to get into the risk, okay? What is the stuff that I have to do to be able to accomplish this, create in terms of risk to the project, whether that's time risk or, usually more importantly, quality risk. Can I do the scratch building and the drilling and the cutting and the whatever it is that has to be done without creating significant risk to the project, given the skills and the tools that you have at your disposal. So, that's kind of a long answer for what sounds like a simple question, but it's not a simple decision. At least it isn't for me. I typically agonize over it. So anyway, that's one really good question that I thought was worth answering at the beginning of this episode. And so with that, let's get into doing some painting. Okay, so finally, let's get back to work. I came in this morning and I was getting ready to shoot some black paint, and I realized, hey, wait a minute, I've got a bunch of Spitfire parts that need black paint. So I decided to combine some tasks, and anyway, so now we are getting into the part of this painting process where we get pieces that have multiple colors, and we have to start to get strategic. But before we do that, a number of these are just straight black. Okay, things like this trim, the trim wheel, that's black. Let's see, that part A30 is all black. AG2, that's all black. Let's see, A24, almost all black. A2, almost all black. Now, and then A29 is also almost all black. But here's where we're going to talk a little bit about strategy, okay? So what I try to do is I work from big to small, and also factoring in what I have to spray versus what I could hand paint. And the fact that I always want to spray if that's an option. I mean, look, I don't pick up a paintbrush unless I'm absolutely forced to. That's just one of my rules. Never pick up a paintbrush until you must. You just always are going to get better results with an airbrush. So let's look at a couple of these parts and talk strategy. Okay, part A2. It is entirely black except for the lever, okay, and that little knob in the middle, which is metallic, silver, aluminum, whatever. Now, that is going to be pretty easy to brush paint, the silver, and so there's not even any reason to consider spraying the whole thing silver and then coming back and brush painting the black. That just wouldn't make any sense. I'm not going to try and mask and spray something that tiny for the silver. So that's a pretty obvious choice that's going to be a two-step process to get that one in its base colors of black and silver. Same thing with this part right here, A24, almost all black. But let's look at this one, part number A29. Okay, it is mostly black, and then it's got XF71, which is Tamiya's approximation of RAF interior green, which I am not going to be using, but nonetheless, it's got three colors on it, because then you've got those light bulbs, which are basically white. Now, the light bulbs, those obviously are going to be detail painted with a brush, okay? So how do we decide between the black and the green? I mean, look, most of the part is black, so going by my big to small rule, you'd think I would be airbrushing that part black, right? Yeah, no, because what I am going to be using for the interior color is, hold on a second, I should have already had it down here. Now I gotta find it. Heck darn. Hold on a second. Okay, I found it. As with everything else pretty much here that I'm airbrushing, I'm going to be using MRP. Now, MRP has two colors that are very good approximations of RAF interior green, which is nothing like zinc chromate. I don't know, don't know how many times I can say that. It's just not that weird apple green. It's not the same as U.S. Air Force, U.S. Army Air Force interior green. It's this very unique shade of gray green. And they've got one called RAF interior green, and then they've got this aircraft gray green, and they're almost indistinguishable. So this is the one I found first, and it's the one that I'm going to be using, and I have to airbrush it. I don't have any choice. Black, on the other hand, I can easily brush paint. So this is a case where I basically have to flip my rule on its head, and I'm gonna start with the green on that one particular part right there. And that's also going to be the same sort of strategy that I'll apply to some others, but we'll get to those. Well, why not? Let's go ahead and talk about it since we're on strategy. Let's look at this part, because again, this sort of defies my rule that I just made. Most of that part is black. And I could certainly justify spraying the whole thing black and then masking or hand painting the aluminum colored bracket that holds it on there. Or it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other to spray the whole thing silver, which is actually what I've already done, and then mask that off and hand paint the black. And that, honestly, I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I'll get to it. But that's a part where you kind of have 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because it's relatively easy to brush paint the black there. And part of the reason I say relatively easy is because it's easy. I try to go low to high when I'm doing brush painting details like that, where there's a frame around something. And what I mean by that is the black surface of the tank is lower than that strap that goes around it. And so what that means is that that strap provides a natural barrier to paint flow from my paintbrush. And it should give me a really nice tight color separation when I do it. We'll see that a little bit more when I actually go to paint that part, but I think that's probably the way that I'll paint that one, given that I'll be brush painting that thing anyway. I can do both of them at the same time. And that's the same thing that applies to this thing right here, part A22. I've already painted it silver, and that I'm going to paint that box that sticks out of it black, and I'm going to do that by hand. Okay, now here we go, multiple colors on this A23 part. Same thing, okay? It's got 3 colors, but the one that governs the process is the interior green. So it's going to get sprayed with that first, and then the other parts of it will get brush painted. Okay, let's see, what else do we have? Okay, we've got a couple down here, all right? Part A15, same thing. It's going to get shot with green first and then brush painted in black. Now, this set of air tanks is kind of a little bit of a bear, okay? Because it is mostly that XF19, that gray color. The plumbing up there is basically silver, steel, aluminum, whatever you want to call it. Same thing with that part down at the bottom. So what I've already done is I've gone ahead and sprayed the entire thing with silver to cover the top and the bottom. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably, I don't know if I'm going to mask and spray or brush paint. I'll see when I get to it. But I'm going to spray the gray. I'm going to do the gray next, and then I will absolutely last mask off those straps that are green, and I'll spray them. Now look, you know how tiny that set of air tanks is. That seems like a ridiculous amount of effort, maybe to some of you, and it is. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the best way to do it, but again, because I have to spray the interior green, I don't really have much choice, and I will get a super tight color separation where that strap is. And you know, that's, to me, that's important. So anyway, we'll get to more of that in a little bit. Right now, let's look at these parts that just need some black on them. Okay. Now, a lot of what intimidates people about painting little tiny parts is, how do I deal with holding on to them, fixturing them, whatever you want to call it? And you're not wrong. I mean, it's a little bit of a challenge. One of my favorite ways to do it is with this stuff right here. This is 3M double-sided tape. And what I do is I just take and I stick a piece of it onto a stick like this, and then I very lightly stick the parts to it. They don't have to be super smashed on there, just enough to keep them there while I airbrush them. And it works great for all these parts because the back side of them doesn't need paint, doesn't matter. And it already has primer on it anyway because I primed them on the sprue. So this is a really super quick and easy way to get all these parts in one color. All right, now for other parts, I'm using my clevers and my resources. Okay, I already have a great little hold handle attached to this instrument panel in the form of the sprue. So I've just cut that section out, and I'm going to leave that on there for as long as I need to. Again, this goes back to my rule: never remove the parts from the sprue until you absolutely have to. And this is a great example of it. Same thing here. Okay, I've left these on here just to keep them out of the way until I decided what to do with them. But I'm not going to be able to leave those on here for painting, because relative to the size of the part, that's a pretty giant attachment there with that sprue gate. And the control column handle is going to be green, I think. At least the bottom portion of it is. And so it's going to have to come off of there to get painted. But we'll get to that, because that's not a situation where I can put it on the double-sided tape, because it needs paint on both sides. So let's get this little tiny thing off of here. And I'm going to once again demonstrate why a really good set of nippers is really important, and why the idea that you can just clip parts rough and then clean up the sprue gate remnants is bullshit in many cases. All right, so let's look at this little gizmo right here. Okay, how am I going to get in there with nail clippers or a hobby knife blade or anything and really make sure that I get that cleaned off smooth? And it needs to be smooth, because when you have little remnants sticking out, they just add up to making your model look rough. So I want to always make sure that I don't have that, and there's just no way to ensure that if I don't get it all done in one operation. Because again, even if I could get a tool in there to effectively clean any remnant of that gate off, how the heck am I going to hold that tiny little part while I do that operation? I mean, it's just ridiculous. So here come my fantastic $35 nippers, totally about to earn their keep. Because think about it, all right? If I try to do this in some other way and it goes flinging off onto the floor, or I ruin it, well, there's only one of these in the kit, and it's an important part, at least if you're going to have the cockpit open. So you really don't want to screw that up, right? You need to be able to handle this in as few operations as possible. And this is one of those times for sure. So what I'm going to do, I want to make sure not to lose it. So here's a good trick. And this is also nice because the part's already black. All right, so I'm going to put down a soft cloth, and I'm going to get lined up here where I can clip this thing really close. And having these nippers with a really sharp point, obviously super important. See that? Look how I was able to just detach that thing and not have it go anywhere. And it should be, anyway, a nice clean cut. If I had dropped it, it would have just stuck to this little towel and we'd be in business. All right, let me zoom in here so you can take a look. There we go. See that? Not perfect, but there's nothing sticking out that's going to show and make it look bad. And it's done in one operation. Okay. Now I can just dump it off here on the little towel, get my tweezers and my sticky paint stick. Very carefully grab it. Don't squeeze too hard, because that's when you eject stuff and send it flying off. Got to make sure I'm getting this on the correct side. All right, and just a little pinch to make sure it's stuck, and boom. Ready to go. All that. Little bit of prep work, you know, not too much, but a little time and care taken in the setup will now make the painting part super easy. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll come back to it. Okay, before I paint, I remembered that I should talk a little bit about mixing, because this is not going to be a straight black. You know, there are people who say, never use straight black, never use straight white. Well, yeah, it's like all rules when it comes to this sort of thing. It's situational. Sometimes black is black and white is white. And that's just all there is to it. But for stuff like this, I like to use about like an 80 or 90% gray. What I mean by that is that it's about 80 or 90% black with a little bit of white added to it. And this is one of the reasons why I love working with MRP so much, because it's so easy to just use the bottles and they're ready to spray right out of the bottle. Just use some pipettes and then just start using, adding drops to your base color in a little cup and mix it up to get what you want. And yeah, I always prefer to mix in a separate little cup so that I can not only make sure that it is well mixed, because when you mix in your airbrush cup, you can't guarantee that, and also so that I can see what I'm doing and know that I've got the color tone that I want. And you can see the difference between what I have here and hard black. All right, this is just a little bit off. And so what I'm hoping is that when I use this, I'm thinking ahead, that not only will this not just look so black and kind of dead, but it will also allow any hard black washes that I use on these parts to show up just enough to create some shadow effects. So there we go. That's the paint that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to go shoot that now, and we'll come back and move on to the next step. Okay, so that was quick and easy. Let's take a look at these parts. All right, you can see, like on this instrument panel, this is just one of the reasons why I love MRP. Look at how tight, okay, if it'll focus, look at how tight and smooth that paint is. That is so sweet. And I just think that outperforms any acrylic every day of the week. I don't think there's any paint that performs as well out of the bottle as MRP, and this is why. If your primer is smooth, your top coat is going to be even better. And you can see that it's got a little bit of a natural sheen to it, and we're going to use that to our advantage here in just a little bit. But the important thing is, you can see, especially on little bitty parts like that where you don't want to soften your detail, how nice that finish is. It's going to be really, really good looking stuff when we install it. Okay, now next step, we're going to paint some interior green, I should say some RAF interior green, because people get the idea that interior green is just sort of this group of colors, and it's really not. I get really picky about this. I like my colors to be accurate, and we'll get into that discussion more as we go on. But I know that it's kind of self-contradictory, because I'm the first one to say that arguing about colors is silly, and it is. But what I really mean is that arguing about shades of colors is silly. It's really easy for the color itself to be wrong, and when I say color itself, I mean the base color. Is it green or is it olive drab? Is it green or is it zinc chromate green? Whatever it is, those are distinct colors, and RAF interior green is a distinct color, different from United States Army Air Force interior green. And USAAF interior green was a distinct color. It was not a group of colors that included bronze green and dark dull green and zinc chromate green and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, let's talk about masking, because we got to do some, okay? There's a color separation on this part right here that has to happen right there along that bulkhead line, which matches up with this place right here in this little cockpit tub part. And we got to mask that. Now, so masking tape is also a subject near and dear to my heart, because it is such an important tool, and I love me some tight color separations. So what I use is either tamiya tape or this MT washi tape, or there's a new tape out from John Geigel over at Masterpiece Models that's really good. This is also a rice paper tape. Now, let me decode everything that I just said because it's important, okay? Regular old masking tape that you get from the hardware store is just some kind of paper and glue and who knows what, and it's not suitable for scale models. For one thing, it has a wrinkly texture and it's stiff, and both of those things can allow paint to bleed underneath it, and you absolutely don't want that. So you want a really soft tape that has a really rather light adhesive and that's really thin, that will conform to details, and that's where washi tape comes in. And what washi means is it's a Japanese term that means basically rice paper. Rice paper masking tape, and the company that invented it is a company called Kemoi Kakoshi. I've got a whole video about this called The Great Kabuki Tape Fraud of 2016. And the reason that it's called that is because you'll see occasionally people talking about kabuki tape. Look, it's dumb. Don't do it unless you just enjoy looking dumb, because kabuki tape is not a thing, okay? Kabuki literally is a form of dance theater in Japan, and they wear masks, and maybe that's where it came from. I don't know. Kemoi has a brand line of tape that's sold in Japan and I think Australia called Kabuki tape, but it's a brand name. It's not a type of tape, okay? Washi is the type of tape. It is that indicates that it's rice paper, which makes it different from other masking tapes. And as far as we know, they may even make some of Tamiya's tape. It's certain that they make the wide 40 millimeter tape, because as you can see it on the inside of the roll. In fact, I think I've got a roll of it right here. I don't use it a whole lot because I just don't need giant tape very often, but this is the Tamiya 40 millimeter, and you can see right there, Kemoi tape, okay? And you can see right here, Kemoi paper, okay? Their other brand name, though, is MT. And the Tamiya stuff, it's what, like $7 a roll? I can buy this entire box of MT washi tape on Amazon for about $12, I think. And this will last you a long time. You can use it for everything. We're not certain that this is the same as all of the narrower Tamiya tapes, but it seems pretty close. I've been using this stuff exclusively for years, and it's been fantastic. I just ran out of my first box of it a few months ago and bought this brand new box. Now, what you have to be careful of is that washi, ironically, in the crafting world, has kind of become a ubiquitous term, like some people have used kabuki for in our space. Because these guys market this colorful tape to the ladies, or guys, I guess, I don't know, maybe some guys do it too, who do scrapbooking and their own kind of crafting. And a lot of times they want tapes that have, patterns on them, like Christmas patterns or Halloween patterns or whatever. And some people have come to believe in the crafting world that washi tape is any kind of colorful tape that has decorative patterns on it. Again, that's not true. Washi means a very specific thing with regard to the type of tape. And so what I always say is, just like with mineral spirits, only use stuff that says 100% mineral spirits. Just get the real thing. It's not hard to find. Anyway, that's enough of my pontificating about masking tape. Let's actually use some of it and do some masking so we can get on with this. And I'm going to say a couple of things about applying the masking tape, and then I'm going to go off and get it done, and then we'll shoot some paint. So, a lot of people feel like that you have to just super duper mash your tape down really hard to get it to work. It's not true. You just don't. It's just not necessary. just get it stuck on there just enough to do the job. Now, I'm also not worried about being super precise with the placement on this, because if you remember, there's a rib that goes right through here. So I don't have to get the exact location perfect because it's going to be covered up. I just want to make sure, really, that I don't get overspray on, oh, whoops, I'm masking the wrong side of the line. That's dumb. Anyway, I just want to make sure that I don't get green overspray on the back part of that where it's supposed to be silver. Oh, I almost forgot one thing. Look, I always do this. In fact, usually when I'm going to do a bunch of masking, what I do is I tear off as many pieces as I think I'm going to need, and I stick them to the back of my hand so that they're handy, and also so that they are less sticky. Okay, that's an important thing. You know, all of these paints are really just fragile, and you can lift them right off with your masking tape if you're not careful. And that's one reason why I say you don't have to really super duper mash it on there. Just lightly burnish it with your finger so that you know that it's got a reasonable seal. Okay, now you can kind of see, sorry, bumping the camera, you can kind of see that that's not a perfect seal, but again, it doesn't have to be, because this paint line, this color separation, is going to be hidden. So that's good enough. And you're like, wait a minute, what about back here? What about the overspray? All right, we'll talk about that when I actually paint the part. But the bottom line is, if you need more masking than that for that part, you're doing it wrong. Okay, now let's take care of this. Now this one's going to be a little bit tricky because it's down in there like that. And we're going to prove that you don't need to have a super seal to get it done. Okay, and again, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that this separation is covered by that former rib, whatever you want to call it. It's a piece of the thing that covers the paint line. There needs to be a more technical term for that, right? So anyway, again, I'm not going to be super concerned about, oh, and here I go again. I'm masking the wrong side of the line. Apparently I'm dyslexic, okay? So, and it's easier, it's better that it's on this side anyway, because the other side is harder to get the tape to lay down on. At any rate, just going to get it down in there enough to make sure that it creates the separation where I need it. So let me not do this on camera. Let me get it done and then come back and show you what I've done. Okay, so we're all good. Got these masked. And again, same strategy with these fuselage parts, okay? All I'm doing is what's necessary to make sure that I don't have any overspray in the area that's supposed to stay silver. All right, so now you're like still freaking out about why I'm using so little masking tape to cover this thing up. All right, so let me show you why. Now, I'm not saying that in all situations that this is how you should operate, but in a situation like this, you certainly should be able to spray this effectively without doing any additional masking, and certainly not excessive. But now that I'm thinking about this and recognizing that I've got, okay, what this is going to come down to is direction of spray. All right, what you never want to do, and yeah, I know I said never. I know I said never say never, but yeah, sometimes never is the appropriate word. And what you never want to do is, unless you just absolutely are forced to, is spray towards the edge of your masking tape. Because obviously, if you've got a little bit of a gap there, you're going to spray right underneath it. You're going to have overspray where you don't want it. And one thing that I have to be careful of is that I'm going to need to get some paint on this side of all of these rib structures. So I may need to spray that direction a little bit. I don't know. Let's see. Let's get some paint going and just get to it. Let's see what we can get done here. I believe we have sufficient masking material for this. Okay, now again, just like with the silver paint, I'm just going to grab paint right out of the bottle, and yeah, I'm going to use this pipette right here that I used. Well, I would if it weren't clogged up. I've got, okay, here we go. This pipette that I used with lacquer, with the black lacquer before. Yeah, I'm going to use it again. And you know why? Because number one, the quick hit of paint that I'm going to grab out of here is not going to be enough to really dissolve all that black and cause it to pollute this green anyway. And look, even if it does, who cares? So it slightly alters the color. I mean, not a big deal. So I tend to operate in what a lot of, in a way that some people would call fast and loose with my pipettes. But I don't like to waste time. I don't like to waste pipettes. I like to get work done, and if you could only see the mess that I made off camera with that pipette, you would laugh at all of that. This is why I hate working on camera, because I just am not dexterous enough to pull it off without creating a problem. Anyhow, there we go. Got paint. Now, let's spray some and see what we can get done here. Okay, and I'm going to try not to get over lacquered, because again, I'm doing this for your benefit without any ventilation. All right, so you can see what I mean. I'm spraying so that the spray goes away from the tape, and I'm keeping my tip down here pretty close. If I get back here, then yeah, I could easily get some overspray on this side of this tape. But by spraying up close like this, I'm keeping that paint nice and tight, and I don't have to worry about a bunch of overspray screwing up my work. Okay, so I've mostly got that. I'll get a little bit on this side of this rib here. Again, I'm spraying mostly vertical, staying away from the tape because I don't need to get over there. I've got that covered pretty well. I need to spray from this direction. And again, 2 to 3 layers. I feel like 3 layers with MRP is the right number for full density, full coverage. But I feel like that right there, that's actually, I think, 4 layers, but that looks good. Okay, now I'm not going to spray all of these on camera. I'm going to park my airbrush for a minute, try not to spill paint on my iPhone or knock the paint bottle over. And let's look at this, okay? Now, again, I'm going to do something that you might think is crazy, okay? I just sprayed this. And I guarantee you that with this MRP being what it is, that I can touch it already. without causing any problems. I don't want to just rest my hot, sweaty fingerprint on there, obviously, but it's okay to touch it. Now, let's peel this tape off. And this is where I want to talk about correctly peeling your tape. And I know some of you guys are like, what? How do you peel tape correctly? Trust me, there's a way. And the way is always peel tape back on itself. And what that means is like this, okay? If you pull the tape straight away from the surface, that's where you create the most direct force on the paint underneath that tape, and you're most likely to yank the paint off. Whereas if you peel the tape back on itself, it's more of a shearing action, if that makes any sense. And you also want to do it at an angle away from the paint line. See how I've got the tape angled back from that paint line? All right. So I'm going to just ease that tape off of there. Don't peel fast. Just slide it. Well, you don't slide it, but ease it right off of there. And boom, done. Masked, shot, clean, tight, no overspray, just like that. Okay, so back at it, and one of the first things that I always do after I paint is I sit down with my Optivisor and my tweezers and take a few quiet minutes to just go over parts and give them a good inspection. I don't think you can ever inspect your work too often, so I'll just sit and start looking around for any kind of little goobers, dust specks, hairs, whatever, stuff that might have got caught in the paint, mistakes, overspray, whatever. And you can see that this stuff all looks pretty good. You can see that that work I did to smooth down those side walls where it had the ejector pin marks are pretty good. I discovered that I made a couple of mistakes. I really should have painted that thing right there. Focus. Should have painted that one green, so I just left it there to repaint because I had also forgotten to clip this off the sprue and it needs to get painted where I clipped it, even though I don't think that clip will show. I really should have assembled the top of the control column to the stalk, so went ahead and did that, and I'll shoot that green with the other bit there. I also missed or forgot that here in the instructions they want you to clip off the side of part A7. You can see right there, and I had forgotten to do that, and so I took care of that, clipped that off. And this is kind of an illustration of what I was talking about before with spray control. The front side of that former is interior green. The back side is silver. And you can see that I painted that part right there next to the silver part on the sprue without doing any masking and without getting any overspray on the part that's supposed to stay silver. It's about just situational awareness, spraying in the correct direction so that your overspray doesn't land where you don't want it, spraying close and tight. And I also use relatively low pressure. I sprayed all this stuff at my usual 15 psi that I use, on the daily with MRP. And got all my masking taken off. That all worked the way that it needed to. So there we go. That stuff's all in pretty good shape. So I'm going to finish doing the spraying on those parts that I missed, and we'll move on. Oh, also, one thing I like to do, all these parts that are done with that stage, I like to collect them up in one of these little cups. That's a good way to keep them safe and out of the way until I need them. So there we go. We can move on. Okay, there you go. Like I said, it didn't seem like I really accomplished a whole lot, but this actually is a pretty big milestone with the cockpit, because the next thing will be detail painting by hand, and that'll be interesting. So I'll see you then. As always, I appreciate you watching. Much love.